2014 International Business Case Presentation, proudly presented by Nexen. Thank you to our judges, Scott Chopper from Nexen, Gail Ball from Nexen, Julie Goss from the Richard Ivey School of Business, Juan Lee from BHP Bilton, Brian Peacock representing CPA, and Victor Thomas from Aspen Medical Canada. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes for questions. I will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university. We ask the audience to exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. Questions? Competitors, you may begin when you're ready.
I'd like to start by saying good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. We are so happy to be in front of you. We are CAT Consulting.
My name is Cam.
My name is Alyssa.
My name is Taylor.
And we're here to talk to you, Yankel, about some current issues that your company is dealing with. So I'll run through a brief agenda about things that we're going to cover today. To begin, the problem that we're here to talk to you with, followed by an analysis of both the internal, the company itself, and the external, the two industries that we're going to be looking at. Next, we'll look at the industry decision, that is, which industry we think Yankel should enter. Following there, we will go into alternatives as to what to do once you're finally in the industry. Continuing on, we'll go through a decision matrix and what decision we have suggested for you. Finally, an implementation strategy, and lastly, some contingency.
So I'm going to start here with the problem. The problem that you're facing right now is whether or not you should move into the coal operations in Australia or focus on diversifying yourself into something like potash in the Canadian industry. So now we're going to move on to this industry analysis.
So to begin, we're going to look at the industry analysis for Yankel itself. There are a lot of strengths and weaknesses faced by Yankel right now. So to begin, we'll start with the strengths. You have a very well-established foot in that coal industry. It's very you guys are very vertically integrated, so you're in a lot of different sectors of the industry. It's not just on the logistics side or on the actual mining area. You're acknowledged as a leader in both health and safety. You guys are actually ranked as one of the world's top leaders in the LTCC mining, so that's very, very attractive. It's important to be well-rounded when you're in that coal industry. And you're also listed on 3 stock exchanges, the New York, Hong Kong, and Shanghai Stock Exchange. One weakness that we do think that Yankel faces is that 95% of revenues come from the coal industry. This is very one-dimensional, and so that does pose a bit of a risk if anything wrong were to happen in that coal industry. Also, there was a recent acquisition that put you $3 billion in debt. It was of course, a good acquisition, but that debt does pose a bit of a weakness because it's tied up some of the funds. Continuing on, we'll look at the external analysis, as Taylor said, of both the coal and the potash industries. Starting with coal, there's a lot of opportunities. Specifically in China, the consumption of coal accounts for almost 46% of the total industry. This is a huge number, and there's a lot of potential there on both the mining aspects and also the delivery producing aspect of that. China also has very large coal reserves that aren't yet tapped, and so this offers further potential of maybe expansion in the actual mining of the coal in China. Continuing on, coal asset prices are depressed. This means that you're able to go in there and spend a lot of money and get a lot of value for what you're actually buying, because things are actually undervalued slightly currently. Finally, the Chinese coal demand is forecasted to be 4.5 billion tons. It's currently 3.3 billion tons, and so there's a whole bunch of future growth potential there. There are some threats in the coal industry. It's commodity prices, as a lot of natural resource industries are, but this is still something that is worth mentioning. And finally, domestic production is expensive. When you're looking at the transportation costs, for example, in China, the railroad systems are often very tied up and bottlenecked due to the transportation costs. And when you conversely look at the highway transportation of these goods, you're finding more further bottlenecks, and that does face a bit of an issue. Continuing on to the potash industry, again, opportunities and threats. Looking at some opportunities, China is the world's largest importer of consumer potash. A huge market, a lot of potential there. Continuing on, gross margins on potash products were above 35%, even in 2009. As we all know, the recession happened in the United States, which spread globally in 2008. So even in 2009, right after that recession, they were still able to have a 35% gross margin, which is quite impressive. Looking into the threats now, permit prices have increased fivefold since 2008. These are the permit prices for the potash industry in Canada right now. So in 2008, they were 5 times cheaper than they would be today if Yancoal were to pursue this endeavor and purchase those permits. Also, the potash industry is very slow to implement. It's one of the most technologically complex mining types of mining, and so by entering that, it's a very long-term process. It's up to 7 years to just establish those mines, get going, and that is a bit of a threat. And also, one last thing to point out is the excess capacity in the Canadian market. 56% of the capacity is not being used right now. So if Yancoal were to enter that Canadian market, there's a chance that the current reserves owned not by Yancoal but by competitors, if you were to enter, they have 56% of unused capacity that they could exploit, drop the price, and create a very bad industry for Yancoal to be entering in that situation. So continuing on, we will look at the decision as to why we picked which industry Yancoal should enter.
So we've got coal, we've got potash. What's the company we're dealing with here today? You and me both know. We are Yancoal. We're going to make the decision to go with coal. And X is a good thing compared to what you would normally see on a market rubric. So we've got a couple of things to compare here. Capital costs, management capital, so the people that you have in place at the different positions in the organization. Your relationship to your core business, that's pretty important in integrating those new units, as well as the forecasted demand and availability of substitutes. You'll see that 1X there for potash, the availability of substitutes. There really is no substitute for potash, whereas if you're looking at energy commodities, coal can be substituted for natural gas, things of that nature, if we're just purely going for energy production. So it is something that we like to take into account there. We've rated highly here for capital costs. It is way less intensive. You're looking at that 7-year program to get that potash mine going. The forecast was between $3 and $12 billion. That's a lot of outflow. Management capital, you are coal-based. You know how coal works, and it's not going to be a problem to roll this into your current operations. That relates back to your core business. 95% of your revenues are derived from the coal business. So this is something you're familiar with. This is something that's going to gel well with your current opportunities, or your current production as well. Forecasted demand. The number that was quoted earlier, about 4.5 billion tons, 4.5 billion tons by 2020. That's a 35% increase in about 10 years. That's just from China alone. China only represents about 46% of the entire industry. So if you're seeing that big of a jump, this is something very exciting. I think coal's the thing to get into, right? So as you'll see here, we decided to go with coal for Yancoal.
So now we're going to move on to the analysis of which company we feel that Yancoal should get into in the Australian market. Before we start here, I would just like to reiterate the goal of Yancoal in terms of their Australian operations. They would like to increase their production to 40 million tons annually. They're currently sitting at 10 million tons annually. And no matter which alternative we do choose, we feel that every single one of these companies has an opportunity to definitely increase that 10 million tons and get closer first is Syntech Projects. It is a company in Australia, and we will go into it in greater depth in just a minute here. The next here is West Farmers Premium Coal, and this is a company in Western Australia, and once again, more details to come. And the last one is Gloucester. So we're going to start here with Syntech Project. Syntech Project currently has reserves of 1.732 million tons of coal. It also has rich resources to be able to tap into, and so therefore it has the potential for production enhancement. It's currently producing 2 million tons a year, but we feel like with the acquisition, you would be able to easily raise that to 16 million tons a year and increase that production output for your Australian operations. So now let's move on to West Farmers Premium Coal. And this company has reserves of 138 million tons. It also has resources of 535 million tons. So once again, it has a lot of opportunities for growth here, and we feel like you could definitely increase that 10 million tons of output out of Australia. It is important to note that this company is located in Western Australia. Western Australia only has 2 companies currently in the coal industry, so we feel like this acquisition would definitely help you gain a good market share on that western part of Australia, and definitely has a lot of opportunity for growth there. And last but not least, I would just like to reiterate here that there is definitely a potential for expansion with West Farmers. Now let's move on to our third company here, and this is Gloucester. Gloucester currently has 275 million tons in reserves, as well as 1.1 billion tons of resources. Now this is a big number. So as with the previous 2 companies, there's definitely potential for expansion and growth with Gloucester. It's currently producing 25 million tons annually, and we feel like this is definitely a number you'd be able to keep up. And with that 10 million tons that you're already producing, this would get you up to 35 million tons, very close to that 40 million ton goal from production from your Australian operations. It's also important to note here that Gloucester, the merger with Gloucester would create large synergies from about $220 million to $380 million. So it would be beneficial for both your company as well as Gloucester. Also through this merger, it would create the world's 9th largest pure play coal company. So this would make you very competitive in the world market as well. So now we're going to move on to our decision analysis.
So looking to see what we think Yancoal should pursue, we made a bit of a decision matrix looking at reserves, resources, production potential, and value added. As Taylor just mentioned, each of the 3 alternatives have different numbers when it comes to their reserves and their resources. Starting with the reserves, Syntech came out on top. They have over 1 billion tons in current reserves, billion tons of coal in current reserves. So that's a quite attractive number, but that's not to say that the other 2 don't. It's just a numbers game in this instance. When it comes to resources, Gloucester really comes out on top. 1.1 billion tons in reserves is a massive number, and there's so much potential there. So we scored at 5, which is the highest on our ranking system. As for production potential, again, because of that huge resource number that is tied to Gloucester, we ranked it the highest on our scale. It's also important to note here, production potential is tied into the fact that talks of a merger with Yancoal and Gloucester have already existed, and so that potential holds a bit more weight because those discussions have already begun. Continuing on to value added, Gloucester really wins out here. And the key here is that it would help further vertically integrate Yancoal in their coal sector as a whole. Every aspect would be broadened, and really you would become more involved in every part of that production. So as you can see, purchasing an equity stake in Gloucester is what we will recommend. as the decision matrix showed, it really comes out on top, and we think that this will be a very beneficial endeavor for young coal to pursue.
We've come up with an implementation plan. Super Bowl's looming. There's no way to win a game without a coach. This is our coach here. We've come up with a three-pronged attack on how we're going to get there. 0 to 6 months range, 6 months to a year, and then that 1 to 2 year range as well. So the immediate stage, we would offer to purchase a 30% equity stake in the Australian company. Just because of the amount of capital that we have tied up in our previous investments and paying off those debts, we have to honor that first. And I feel that with the liquidity that we have, a 30% stake of $2 billion is it's a good leap, but it's also a manageable leap. It gives us a chance to, it gives you a chance rather to test the waters and without being fully submerged. We'd also suggest that you sign a contract to expand that. So pending performance, you'll be able to expand up to 50%. Again, further review, maybe in the future you could go up to fully owned. So that's 6 months to 1 year, developing that growth plan. We're going to be looking at increasing the output from your existing mines, getting the most out of what we have, and then capitalizing on what we're bringing in. We'd like to incorporate that in new infrastructure there, so promoting the value added, the logistics, the transportation. As it is already cheap to produce in Australia, the further you refine that down, the further you drive the cost, and ultimately that contributes to your bottom line there. So looking at the 1 to 2 year plan here, further refinement of that value chain, the chase to the bottom, we want to cut those costs. We want to see you realize as much out of the reserves that you're pulling out of the ground and not have that tied up in transportation costs and selling costs. Evaluate that company performance. This is the time to look at whether you're going to make that extra jump of the 20% pickup, whether you want to own 50% of this company. This is the time to look at that. So looking at key economic indicators in the company, looking at ratio analysis there, and seeing whether this is the best place to put your money at the time. So our contingencies. We've come up with 2 main problems that we think that may come up and how to address them. I'll go into just right here. So how is Yang Coal going to protect itself from fluctuations in commodities? This is a thing that all commodity companies face. So how are you going to hedge yourself on that? And how are you going to compete with alternatives? Unlike potash, which is a standalone product, there aren't very many things that you could readily substitute. As this is an energy commodity, there are things that could potentially replace it. So how are you going to add that value? And how are you going to make your products stand out even though it is a commodity? We think that by further refining that value chain, that's going to drive your costs down. So being a cost leader is here. If you can offer your product in the quantity the buyers need it, at the cost that they're willing to pay, and that's below the market, or in a more competitive sense, you're going to be the leader here. So driving that cost down is a simple game. Lowest guy wins here. So it's all about moving volume. So in summary, we've identified our problem here, whether you should go into potash or coal. We've decided to go with coal here because it fits with your business unit, it fits with your name. Name is half the things, right? Yeah, coal. Industry decision, like I said, go with coal. Alternatives, we looked at the 3 different Australian projects and decided to opt for the larger one of the 3. It gives you the most comprehensive look at integrating more Australian assets. It also adds that value chain, and it brings more things into the fold to help you reduce those overall costs. This is matrix again, just further refining why we chose that, and an implementation, very much the important aspect here. The team is useless without a coach, and so the coach here is how you're going to get to that next level, how you're going to drive those costs, and how you're going to see Yang Coal move forward as a cost leader and further hedge itself against risks such as commodity price risk or substitutable products. So without further ado, I'd like to open the floor to some questions here.
I'm convinced that you did state at the outset that there's some risk of all eggs in one basket syndrome. You said 10% revenues. Can you just address that so that I don't have to be concerned that all eggs one basket is risk?
While all eggs would be in one basket, if you can readily supply your commodity in the quantity that people need it at a price that is appropriate to the market conditions in a profitable manner, I think you're going to do all right all times.
And you think Gloucester is going to get us close to that point?
Yeah, but promoting that value chain and the value added, incorporating more things in-house to drive down the costs and reduce expenditures there, I think that you're going to be able to drive that cost lower, and you're going to see that in greener black and broadway balance.
You may have said this in the dismissal. I know you stated why you go because less than controlling interest in why 30% from the last month. Will you pick or did it have some case?
We went with 30% because ultimately we did have the cash to cover that. That's not how we would suggest that you finance the 30%, but because there was the cash to cover that, you already have that $3 billion in debt owed to your parent company. So we felt it was kind of a safer option and not delving too far into the project before going any further.
Yeah, it'd be about a $600 million outflow, which you could cover with your cash reserves currently, and we think that it was a sizable portion to consider. Yeah.
If the parent company backs some cash, would you recommend going bigger than 50% of that?
Yeah, we thought that having more control would probably be better in that case. As we suggested, if we could gain more of the share in that situation as time went further, it would be better. So if the parent company were to back it, we had discussed a possible just acquisition of the company as a whole. But because of the previous acquisition and the debt that Yancoal is currently facing, we went for the equity stake instead.
I would take a step back and talk more about potash. I agree that, from a synergies perspective, there's probably not a lot to offer. But if everyone felt that way, then essentially what we'd be left with are organ companies devouring a growing pie. I think that our company being an SOE, we do have certain resources that other people don't have. I mean, in the short term, debt is an issue, but over the long term, it would not be. So what I want to know is, what's your view on the potash market? If you like it, then why don't we just throw some money at the permits? There's no benefits to develop this.
But it's just a cash outflow. I don't think that buying permits would be the best way to go about this. Our success was with buying these established companies and integrating those into our business unit. So buy something that's working rather than take the risk.
Yeah, but currently we did this based on financials for the potash. We just didn't really feel like it fit with your situation at the moment.
Okay. And what's your view on the potash market? Do you like it? Like, never mind the permits and that kind of growth.
Well, it's exciting prospects for growth, especially in the Chinese market, forecasted by 2025 for like a threefold growth. So that is something that you will want to tap into, but I do believe that right now, spending that money on just a permit, it's just going to be an asset that you're not producing anything from it. So I feel that if we were to put your money towards an asset that's going to be producing currently, it's going to be better served for your portfolio.
Can I also add here that potash is a market that is regulated very heavily by the government. They do have a big stake in the potash market. So that's another threat, definitely, to entering it. And we just weren't sure that's something we wanted to battle up.
Well, I think we're really like to become more of a global player, and certainly all the goals. Would you consider pursuing coal in another country like Canada, for instance?
We had discussed different avenues that we thought that Yancoal would really benefit from entering. Because you're already in the Australian market and this opportunity presented itself in such that it was a really nice package. And so by entering that market and finding a successful partner, it was just a way to really expand what you currently